Welcome to this panel discussion entitled Consolidation, Why 4 into 3 Will and Should Happen in Europe and Beyond. So thanks for the introduction, Annie. My name is Kester Mann. I'm Director of Consumer and Connectivity at CCS Insight. A quick background to me, I've been in telecoms for about 20 years now, including 12 at CCS Insight. I'm also of Nokia and Informa Telecoms and Media in previous lives, so plenty of experience both inside and outside the industry. And I've tracked operator strategy for much of this time. And I have to say that during my time in the industry, deal-making, mergers, acquisitions have always been a very prominent and pertinent topic for the sector. But I'm delighted to be joined by a great panel to discuss this. We have John Strand, CEO of Strand Consult, and Monika Nowak-Toporowicz, CTIO of Virgin Media in Ireland. And Annie, of course, probably needs little introduction as the editor of Mobile Europe. Annie, thanks so much for stepping in at late notice. All, I'm sure, have very strong views on mergers, and I have to say I've already borne witness to that in the rehearsals, so I'm sure we're in for a pretty lively and thought-provoking debate. Before I hand the baton on to hear from our panelists, I'm just going to set the scene a little bit and share a few thoughts of my own. Now, firstly, I've already mentioned mergers, joint ventures, acquisitions, disposals, and other forms of deal-making have been part of the telecom sector pretty much since its inception, I'd say. And yet now, as we're emerging from COVID and with telecoms operators still struggling to achieve financial growth to match usage growth, it's probably as hot a topic as it's ever been. Now, around about 6 years ago, we saw a flurry of proposed in-market deals that failed to achieve regulatory approval due to concerns from authorities around pricing, competition, investment, and ultimately, of course, the long-term impact on customers. And these include a deal between Telia and Telenor in Denmark in 2015, and then also Three's planned acquisition of O2 in the UK a year later. Since then, mergers and acquisitions have pretty much fallen off the radar, at least within the same market, for example, mobile to mobile. And this is often referred to as moving from 4 operators to 3. And that's a transition that many CEOs are keen to encourage. So deals involving companies, for example, with an interest in broadband and mobile, so kind of different market mergers, so such as Virgin Media and O2 in the UK, have had no problems getting approval. And we've seen a flurry of these types of deals happening, as well as different deals in other areas such as content and mobile towers. But I'd say for 2 key reasons, the topic of 4 to 3 is high on executives' radar once again. And these reasons are, one, the European Court's decision last year to uphold an appeal against the annulment of the 302 deal, and also hopes that regulators will start to take a more sympathetic stance after operators more than proved their worth during the pandemic. And maybe the latter certainly encouraged Orange and MásMóvil in Spain to announce their plans to merge just a few months ago. And that really is the first major deal we've seen since COVID, and one I'm sure will be very closely watched by the industry to see if it gets the regulatory green light. And if it does, perhaps it will open the floodgates to other deals elsewhere. But I think that's more than enough for me. They were just a few opening thoughts. What we're really here to hear from is from John, Monika, and Annie. So perhaps we could kick off, and maybe I could ask you both in turn, perhaps just to introduce yourself briefly and also your companies, and then perhaps maybe as a part of that, just to share with the audience one factoid, one piece of research, maybe one finding, one other viewpoint, just merely as a kind of kick-off to the discussion and to set the scene. So who should we start with? Monika, can we start with you, please? I'm not sure, Monika, if you're on mute there.
I was on mute, that's true. So once again, thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you, Kester, for your introduction. So I am CTO for Ireland, and being a CTO, I need to say that from a technology perspective, mergers and acquisitions are daunting tasks, are boring. So every system and every process needs to be integrated for both of the campuses. That's never easy. It needs to be analyzed and harmonized. And this process is known as post-merger acquisition, or you can shortly call it PMI as an abbreviation. We can actually spend a lot of time on due diligence, on identifying targets, but we can do all the best. But finally, everything can be spoiled in integration. So referring to the previous session, it is just so much important how we design the architecture for the post-merger acquisition from the technology perspective. How we use the BSS of those two companies, the OSS of two companies, to create something which is actually 4 out of 1 + 1, not even 3. That's key for the success of the M&A. So you will probably talk a lot about the regulatory landscape, but I am not a regulatory lawyer. I'm a pragmatic practitioner, and then with the engineering brain. So from this perspective, it's so key to understand and try to analyze, even before we start, how we plan to integrate the companies. I honestly believe that's a key success factor for a successful integration, whatever we do. So that's from my side. I am the lucky one representing Ireland, who is owned by the company, which is known from only good integrations and only good mergers, guys. So we have a strong backup in Liberty Global, which is actually, knowing and doing this perfectly. That's all from my side. Thank you very much for this introduction.
Right. Thank you very much, Monika, and very valid point, I think, on the challenges around the technical integration. I think we've certainly seen that amongst some of the other deals that have struck, and it's one thing getting a deal over the line from a regulatory standpoint, but it's another totally getting the two companies aligned, the network, the infrastructure, and so on. So it's a daunting task, as you rightly say. Thank you. John, would you like to introduce yourself and perhaps share some open thoughts?
Oh, yes. So first I would like to say thank you for inviting me. I'm sitting here in an airport. My flight this morning to Brussels was like a lot of other flights, and I had to take the plane to Eindhoven in the Netherlands and a train from here. So that is how it is post-COVID. But my name is John Strand. I've been running Strand Consult for 25 years. We're not a consultant company, but we're a company which is selling knowledge for top management and board members, telecom operators across the world. And we have like 170 operators in our client list. We've been looking very much into different subjects, but the 4-3 merger part have we been looking into. Starting the first case study we did was in 2002 about Korea, where they went from 5 to 3 operators. So we have more than 20 years anniversary of doing case studies of 4-3 mergers. And we have a team of people which have competition experts and so on, been looking at what is the effect if you do it, what is the effect if you don't do it. And we've been looking at this across the world, from US to Latin America, all over Europe, where we've seen a lot of attempts, and to Asia, of course, and Africa again. So we have been basically have a global view of these things. What's very important for us is to say, what tools are you using when you evaluate about it's a good idea to do 4-3 merger? So that's one thing. And we also need to look at it from two perspectives. We also need to look at it from a shareholder's perspective. It's a merger which adds value to the shareholders, and it's a merger which also at the same time adds value to the market. So I think it's very important to look at both things. Personally, I have nothing against you make a merger which don't add any value to the market, but add a lot of value to the shareholders. Why that? It sounds a little bit absurd. And why do you say that? Or why could you say those things? It's basically because if we have a healthy industry, we will also have a high investment level. And what we have seen in Europe, in Africa, in Latin America, is that the high numbers of operators actually have a negative impact on the investment level. If we compare to the US, where we basically have had a massive consolidation, few operators, we basically see an investment level which is significantly higher than what we see in Europe. And so in that way, for me, it's very important to say, how do we as a society get access to the best infrastructure, and how do we create an environment where shareholders want to invest in our digital society? Very simple and easy.
Thanks, John. Some great thoughts. And goodness, 20 years ago we went from 5 to 3 in South Korea. That feels like a different era for the sector, doesn't it? And thank you. Really Definitely. Appreciate those opening remarks. Goodness, Annie, any quick thoughts from your side on consolidation? Such a big
the grand old lady of telecom. So good to see you, Annie.
You too. So I think the first thing is, isn't it interesting? Who's got the best 5G network in the world? Korea. I think something I find really exasperating about competition regulation is the focus on price and speed, and that competition serves consumers best. As somebody who lives in the middle of a field, in a house, but in the middle of a field, in the middle of nowhere, along with maybe, I don't know, I think it's 29% of Europe's population live in rural areas. What happens is when you design competition in that way is that you have the operators killing each other to build out infrastructure in towns and cities where they're going to get a fast return on investment, and a huge lump of the population is completely ignored. And actually, arguably, people who live in remote areas can get the greatest productivity boost of all, which is fabulous for the local population, for the economy, from connectivity. So instead of, somebody in London having a choice of 5 fibre networks, that model and that way of regulation ends up in people in rural areas having nothing. And guess what? Where they don't want to build fibre, generally the 4G coverage is pants as well. Although generally that's been better addressed by now. But, if one doesn't work because it's not worth building out, the alternative generally is poor. The provision of it is poor too.
Yeah, thanks, Annie. That's a very valid point on the rural coverage, and I think it's an area that's clearly an increasing focus for governments and authorities and regulators, but still an area that has been disappointingly served by the telecom industry as a whole.
I also think, given the pandemic and a big movement out of urban areas, it's something that perhaps should have gone up the agenda pretty higher
up the political radar. Yeah, very, very valid point. Okay, fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for those introductory remarks. So, kind of moving the conversation on a little bit. As I say, I've tracked this industry for a long time, and it feels to me that all of a sudden consolidation is the big hot topic amongst the industry at the moment. But is this not just a bit of an excuse from the operators who haven't really been effectively able to capitalise on soaring demand for connectivity? We all know how getting online has proved its worth during the pandemic, how important it is, and how much more people are using their network provider. But is it an easy way out for the industry to say, hey, we're going to consolidate as a response to our poor stock performance and meagre revenue growth? Or am I being unfair on that? Who wants to start? John, do you want to kick off on that one?
I think I understand, and I think the argument for doing a consolidation is totally fair. And I'm really pro consolidation. I've been writing a huge report. We've been writing a huge report about these things, looking from all the perspective. But we also have to be honest, a lot of European operators have been mismanaged, okay? That's one problem. We have actually the management of European operators have not been so successful as management in other countries. And that's a reality. Across Europe, we have some cases where some operators have been very successful. The turnaround of T-Mobile in the Netherlands is one good case. Play P4 in Poland is another good case. Hutchinson in Denmark is another good case. So there is a lot of cases across the world, across Europe, where you have been small operators have gone from being the smallest guy in the class to being the biggest or the second biggest guy in the class and been very successful. We also see some European operators which basically claim that, the investment environment in Europe is not so good. And they have been taking a lot of the European revenue they have made and reinvested that in other countries. Vodafone's investments in India, I think it's $58 billion they have invested and lost in India, just to take one example. those money could have done a great job in Europe. If you look at Deutsche Telekom's investment in T-Mobile US, if they sold 10% of their shares in T-Mobile US, they could basically deliver gold-plated fiber to all households in Germany. So I think it's very important to say that there's a lot of good arguments. This is an industry of scale. Yes, industry of scale, you need scale, and the only way to get scale is to have less players in the market and create consolidation. But sometimes, because I think there's the problems, it's a two-sided problem. On the one side, you have the way the competition people are looking at this, and you can look at the court case, Hutchison 02 against Vestager, and look at that result. Was very predictable that the court would go into that direction because the competition people have a wrong view of what's create competition in the industry. It's not the numbers of players, but the technological development. So that's one thing. US is a great case on that. But on the other side, sometimes operators try to say those things they believe the political system, consumer organizations, and regulators would like to hear. And sometimes say things which is too good to be true. If you go to our website, I made a research notes about too good to be true, describing a lot of these cases. And I one of my employees was an expert witness in the U.S. Senate when there was a hearing about the Sprint T-Mobile merger, and she basically defended it and said, "Listen, we think it's a good idea," and we also came a statement about it, which you can find on our website and so on. But I must say, some of the things Sprint and T-Mobile said in the U.S. was definitely not true. And everyone would know that. It was too good to be true. Okay, they succeed to get the merger approved. But I think we have to be a little bit more realistic on both sides. We need to say, yes, on the paper, that's the dilemma of the telecommunication industry is the fact that some of those things which don't look good in consumers' ears is actually the things which give the consumers a better product and cheaper prices. And sometimes it's like, oh, if we have many players, we must have low prices. No, if we have many players, they have at a high cost level, and they will not be able to make the investment they should do moving forwards. And it's, again, when EU have been going out saying, oh, they should consolidate across EU. Again, there's no cross-border synergies in this industry. There's in-market synergies, and the best synergies to reduce costs is by putting together two mobile operators. Like Monika representing mobile cable mergers, the synergies is quite limited, okay? It's very limited, but the Commission, they really love these kind of mergers, despite the fact that it's not providing with better products or cheaper prices, if you could say like that, okay? Yeah. And Telenet in Belgium is a very good case on that. So it's Telenet base case in Belgium is a merger is a good case to look at there. So I think we should have a little bit more realistic into the debate. We should look at facts. We should basically look at what's happened with those mergers which didn't get approved. England, one case. Denmark, Telenor, Telia in Denmark. Case we have seen in Denmark increasing prices after the Commission's denied Telenor to merger. Yeah, and it's
Thank you, John.
If I could build on this, that would be great. And also commenting on Telenet, I agree that there is a limited, integration benefit in emerging mobile and fixed, but there still is something which is very valid. So we can actually better manage the customer's base, and that's what we've done in Telenet. I know this pretty much because it's the same group, so it's also owned by Liberty Global. So there is still some value, and being an operator, I agree with you that the simple answer is it depends. Some of the operators they use it as an excuse, but in general, I would say no, because the infrastructure investment to ensure so fast connectivity, growth requirements, it's significant. The data growth and the data consumption is growing 30% year to year. So that means it's growing much faster than the revenue which is coming from the service, and therefore consolidation might be an efficient option on top of the investment. And I need to be very honest with you. We invest a lot to keep our network up to speed and to deliver the requirement for capacity for our customers. But sometimes that's not enough, and we need to recharge for M&A as a solution to deliver even more. And on top of this, at the same time, the prices to consumer for speed are actually reducing. So having all of this, the huge demand for the capacity increase, the prices which are not going up, we need to be open for different solutions than the natural investment as a standalone company into the capacity going forward.
Yeah. And Monika, no, that's great views to hear that. And I guess from an Ireland perspective, you've borne witness firsthand to consolidation in your market with obviously 3 buying O2. I think was it 2014, something like that.
Yeah.
So how has that, from your perspective, how has that impacted the market? And I guess from a Virgin Media perspective, it's been quite impactful because it's opened up some opportunities for you to move into the MVNO space. But as witness to a merger, I'm really interested to hear your thoughts.
Sure, I was not witnessing yet this I was not in Virgin Media, but I'm smiling because we are biased a bit, like as Virgin Media, because we benefited a lot from this merger. We've been getting a lot, huge, very good contract terms as a result of the remedy. So for me, that was a good decision, and it has been proved later on with all the benchmarks, which are very good still for the Irish network versus the European networks. And we maintain. That means that the operators in Ireland, they maintain the quality, they deliver to customers high-level product despite the integration which happened. And the Irish market, it's small, unlike the other European markets, and we still have 5 to 6 big players in Ireland. We have Free, we have Vodafone, we have Air as an incumbent, and we have a number of quite a significant MVNOs, Tesco Mobile and Virgin Media Ireland as an example. So I think it was a good move, and all customers benefited from this. We specifically, being Virgin Media Ireland, we benefited a lot. We've been able to step into this grant and become a MVNO as a result of this merger. So yeah, that's how I see this.
Yeah, and that's a very good point in terms of facilitating other providers and other operators. And of course, we've seen that in other markets, and Italy is a great example of that, where obviously we had the Win3 merger allowed several years ago, and that's actually resulted in a new player, Iliad, entering the market and being very, very disruptive. So it's not necessarily just a matter of consolidation and then we've got a reduction in players. Actually, it can facilitate some other structural changes to the market. It can
trigger a new player to become a player in the market. Yes.
Yeah. Annie, any thoughts from you on this? Am I being mean to suggest that operators are using consolidation as an excuse for poor performance, or what? Where do you feel on this?
I have some sympathy, but I don't think it's anything like the whole story at all. And I think it's based on a belief system, as John said, rather than fact. As for the consolidation as well, I'd be interested to hear what Monika has to say, particularly as she wears the shoes, if you see what I mean. I do wonder, at the moment, telecoms, we're struggling to find additional sources of revenue, which is what we need to grow. Because if we don't, we've got this low level, incremental growth. So we need to find new drivers of growth. And my question is, if we just are going for mergers, let's say two mobile operators, it seems to me that the points are likely to be like efficiency, cost reduction, and scale, rather than innovation and new services. I'd even go so far as to suggest, because as Monika explained really well, when you do a merger, every system, every process, has to be integrated. And that's a no mean undertaking, and it's a heavy cost. So I'm just wondering, even if the integration goes beautifully and doesn't cost an eye-watering amount of money, we're still left with the incremental growth model at the end of it, aren't we?
Monika, any thoughts on that one from Annie?
we should now talk and discuss what is innovation, how to drive innovation, how to think about creating new products. And, to be able to do this, we need to fix the basic. And, fix the basic means just to integrate properly the two companies and then create the environment for the further innovation and bringing new products, which will happen. But, it's not easy. And then we don't talk about, John, you want to say something? I see. Yeah.
No, but I think it's, I've been in this industry for more than 25 years. and honestly, I listen, let's be honest. France Telecom invented the internet, okay? It's called Minitel. They were sticking to that model, and actually internet was rolled out much later in France because Minitel was so successful, which was like basically a phone terminal. And I remember in the 80s when my father was living in France, we used to order train tickets, airline tickets. You could even do gambling on it and so on. Yeah. And honestly, I've seen operators try to move into the, we want to be innovative and we want to create services. Orange Live, Vodafone Live, Orange World, these mobile portals and so on. And let's be honest, innovation is not coming from this industry. I wish. It's the OTT guys, okay? And if you were the smart, innovative guy, what would you like to do? Would you like to work for one of the big operators, or you worked in a cool startup company? I'm sorry to say it, okay? So I think it's we must probably not be a little bit more realistic and say the reality is that the telecom operators used to get 100% of the wallet. Now they have maybe 15 or 20%. Because the other things we consume on our devices is services from different OTT players, okay? And the reality is that the telecom operators, last time they had something which was creating innovation was when they introduced a business model called premium SMS. And that's about around 1999, 2000, 2001. And it's still even today on TV votings a success. So I think this industry looks more and more like an industry which is commoditized, like other kind of utility industries, water and electricity. And there's nothing wrong in being commoditized as long as you have an efficient, well-driven industry. And to a certain extent, I feel we're going down that path right now because we see numbers of operators like TDC in Denmark, Telia in Sweden, splitting their operations into a service company and a network company. We see other operators starting with the tower spin-off and so on. So basically, I think the reality is that maybe we just have to come to a point where we realize this is utility industry, and we just have to run the business as efficient as possible. And for old people like me and Annie, which have been for this industry for so long time, then it's a little bit disappointing because we always had this dream about this new innovation, and we saw it with 3G, but the operators didn't succeed with 3G. And if we look at all the innovations happened when we came to 4G and smartphones, all the revenue went to Apple, Google, and all of the other OTT players. And now the operators have a dream of becoming rich in 5G. And basically, I doubt it. I honestly wish I could go out and say it will happen. But honestly, if I was going to a bookmaker and putting my money, where would I put my money? On the OTT guys or on the telecom operators to be the one who generate the revenue and the service in the future? I'm sorry, I would never put it on the operators. I'm sorry to say.
I hear you, but it sounds a little bit too pessimistic in my view. So I agree with you that the innovative people mainly joined. I know. Let me finish, please. Startups, but only a small percentage of startups it's successful. That's actually the reality. And I still think we should keep on innovating, and we should be doing this because the change might come from unexpected sides. And I wouldn't give up. I would never give up of innovation. It's not fair to say this is only commodity. We should stop even trying innovating in telco. I absolutely disagree with this statement. We should try and innovate in telco. Whether that's going to be successful or not, it's not an easy answer, but we cannot give up on this because that's going to be the only one direction, which is not the direction we want to take as telco operators.
Well, I'd like to point out as well, innovation is often not necessarily something new. It's doing something a lot smarter. And I mean, look at Apple, that very nearly went bust in the 90s and had to have Microsoft bail it out to put up the pretense, at least, of having competition. And I mean, one of the big things that turned Apple around was figuring out how to use MP3, which had been around for a decade or more, and making it easier to buy songs and steal them. Mm. I mean, look at Microsoft after the sort of 90s, when it developed a terrible reputation for anti-competitive behavior. And generally, Bill Gates said it nearly missed the internet. And then it seemed to wade in treacle while Steve Ballmer was in charge. I mean, look at it now. I mean, that's a huge, huge company that's done a fabulous pivot.
Yeah. Very good. Well, listen, I'm conscious of time, and I want to move on a little bit more, talk a little bit about regulation. And I mentioned it in my kind of opening remarks around, potential change in regulatory sentiment towards M&A. And I think there's a view by some in the industry that maybe regulators are potentially becoming more sympathetic, more lenient, more open to consolidation and deals. And this is off the back of a very strong performance by the networks during the pandemic. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. And I'd actually like to sort of frame this question as well by sharing a comment from Ofcom in a recent discussion paper on the topic. And it said, "We've reviewed several empirical studies in this area, as well as conducting our own research. And the conclusion of our review is that contrary to the findings of some previous studies, there is no evidence to support the hypothesis that service quality and/or investment increases when markets become more concentrated." So, John, I'm going to put this one first to you. And I just wonder, do you feel in your conversations with the industry and perhaps with regulators in particular that we're seeing a bit of a shift in mindset? Or yes, are we still kind of...
Yes and no. Ofcom is among my favorite regulators, to be honest. And I've worked with regulators across the whole world. They have some very smart people. And honestly, I really miss them in the European Union. I really miss their voice in the European, when it comes to European regulation, because they have some very bold statements. They have a very clear analysis. They were very critical to net neutrality regulation. And if I was just sitting here the other day reading their statements on net neutrality from 2011, 2015, 2017, and so on, and everything they said about why net neutrality regulation is not so good, have proven now that it was true. Okay, so that's the interesting thing. We have seen in Europe that there have been this story, particularly inside the European Union, that Europe is falling behind, and the numbers in the US, especially over the last 12, 13 years, the US invested twice as much per capita or household as we've done in Europe. And I think we did the first report describing that like 7 or 8 years ago. And basically, we have had this whole story about falling behind. And basically, I think that the European Union come to the point, and the numbers of European regulators come to the point where they realize that it is a scale business. You cannot look at the competition in telecommunication as the same way as you look in other industries where competition is equal to the numbers of players in the market. And I think it's important to say that we are in a situation where I think that a number of regulators are starting opening their eyes and understand what's going on, and listening to the critics, which have come from people which are competent and have done case studies and doing all those things. The problem is probably some of them are afraid of losing face, and they have to come to the point where we're moving in the right direction. But the question is, will we be there in time? And I think we should have had this consolidation in Europe before the operators started investing in 5G spectrum and 5G infrastructure. We are basically, that train for the consolidation is really valuable just before you start to make the huge investments. That's the reason why the Sprint T-Mobile deal actually have become a bigger success than a lot of people actually predicted, because Sprint was behind with the investment, and T-Mobile was in the beginning of the investment rolling out 5G. So in this way, the synergies was much bigger when you make this technology shift. And you can say next time we're going to have a technology shift in Europe is around. We're in the beginning of the 5G rollout. Now we have about 5G on about 30% of the sites in Europe. And it was 24% in the end of last year. And I think we probably maybe 34, 35% now. But there's still a way to go. But before the mergers will be approved, will take 1 to 2 years. And if I look at the rolling out of 5G in Europe over the next 1 to 2 years, in 2 years, we are basically there, if you could say like that.
Yeah. And Monika, can I just I want to get some, there's been a couple of questions coming on the chat as well, but Monika, just interested in your views on this. Any thoughts on perhaps a change in the regulatory sentiment, or indeed perhaps on the use of remedies and concessions to kind of smooth through deals and facilitate them? It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that.
The regulator has the challenge of both promoting investment to ensure that the demands of consumers can be met for speed and consumption, but also ensuring that we have competitive market and we have a sufficient number of players to the market to stay competitive. Key is to deliver, in my view, the variety of choice on the retail level. How we manage the network utilization in the background is a different question. So, in the country, which is small like an island, it doesn't make sense to have 4 networks underutilized to deliver services for customers. Yeah, but it does make sense to have a number of retail players delivering services to customers. And with this, hopefully, it will be somehow recognized by the regulator, and they will use this, for the decisions going forward. That's how I would see this.
Yeah. We've had a couple of questions coming in on the chat, and a couple around innovation. And I'm going to try and merge, to use a good term for this particular panel, to merge these two into one. So one is around the subject is innovation. So one is asking how we can encourage operators to innovate individually rather than relying on slow-moving industry groups and coalitions of losers. And the other is around is there not a dilemma for the telco industry that all operators want to innovate in the tech industry, but most of them have hardly any R&D units and are investing as little as 0.5% into R&D. So two kind of R&D innovation related questions there, and good questions as well. Perhaps I don't know whether John or Monika or Annie want to pick that one up first. John, did you have your finger up on that one?
Coming from two interesting people. Patrick Loberg, he is from Connect 44, which is a quite interesting company, which basically, I know the Danish units very well, which have a fantastic CEO, and his company is doing a lot of innovation, which no operators have ever done before. They're basically reducing the cost of rolling out new infrastructure dramatically, and also helping reducing rental costs and stuff like that. But when that is said, it's true that the operators don't have any R&D department like they had in the olden days, and that's basically because in the olden days it was developing phones, they were developing a lot of other things, and innovation for a telecom operator is something you buy. I don't believe that any operators have the scale to develop something innovative, if you could say like that. Okay, that's basically. So I think and it leads into Dean's question regarding that they do these things, and rich communication services is which he's referring to in his question is another example of these GSMA things. Which would never fly. I remember the GSMA said, premium SMS was a success, so now we want to make one API. What's the whole idea to offer developers a suite of APIs? But they developed a fantastic API portfolio, and they was hit by two things. For the first thing, they forgot to build the business model around it. And I remember meetings with GSMA discussing where the business model for one API. And they couldn't explain, each operator must find their own way of doing things. The model from premium SMS was in place from day number one. And when it comes to that never fly, enriched communication service, exactly the same, because the OTT guys have developed better products. I love WhatsApp. Okay. I have clients which are mobile operators in Africa, and they say, when you call me, use WhatsApp. Okay. Better sound quality, send messages. We do it on WhatsApp. I'm sorry to say it. So I remember Orange, they invested a lot of money trying to make an alternative to WhatsApp. I don't know about it's still alive, or I know it's probably was stillborn. So I think we have to be realistic. Our operators capable to do these things. You see now they try to do a lot around Open RAN, which is also a disaster. And honestly, I think it's important sometimes you have to know where your limitations is. And I think there's some operators, Monika, it's not like I disagree with you regarding operators try to work with innovation. But if I was an operator, I would say, how can I create business partnerships and business models?
Absolutely.
So innovative people can work with me. How can I be more accessible? Okay. How can I help people?
That was exactly my point. How we can create platform for the innovative people and for the OTT creators to join us and work together.
Last time operators had success with that was with premium SMS, and that goes back to year 2000. Yeah. I remember we made a report about the business models behind premium SMS and describing and updating all the time with the revenue sharing models which operators had all over the world. And we sold it to 180, 200 operators across the world. And for 2 years, I was traveling around telling about premium SMS and how they could share revenue and all those things. And I think the app revenue passed the premium SMS revenue 3 or 4 years ago, something like that. It was a giant value, Monika, a lot of money for the operators.
Monika, do you want to expand on that one on the innovation side? And
I just want to comment on this, low percentage on R&D. That's actually true, and that's the consequence of us. Telco operators having huge base of our customers, and they need to maintain the basic, which is the capacity growth. And this is where we are mainly utilizing our budget just to keep the network up and running. So it's very hard to invest a lot in innovation. So it was actually a very good point which John mentioned, and he touched upon this, that we need to be open for creating platforms with other players from the market and joining forces to create together and to deliver together to our customers in an innovative way. But that means that we still need to not only invest in capacity, but also in the digital platforms, in digitalization, in automation, and coming as close as to our customers in this new digital way, where in telco, it's not so obvious that we, deliver to our customers in a digital way. This is still a way of education, and we need to create this need for our telco customers to be more digital, and then join in partnership with the other players and work together by joining the forces. So that's how I see this, and I agree with you, John, but it's still innovation. So that's how I was reacting and overreacting probably when I say there is no place for innovation in telco, because I do believe there is. Yeah.
Monika, if I could stay with you actually, just on another one that's come through on the chat, asking what's most important to focus on: strategy, methods of processes, or technology during a merger? And I remember right at the top of the discussion you talked about the technology side, but where should the priorities be, or is that not a question that can be answered? And then
I see John is raising his hand.
Carry on, Monika. Carry on.
Talk, Monika.
There is no simple answer, guys. All of this, honestly, all of this. Yeah. Architecture is key, because without architecture, we cannot properly design. It's like, about designing the car. When you do wrong design, then you need a couple of team at the end of the construction line to check if everything has been connected as it should be. But, architecture and design without proper execution is always also a disaster. So what is important, what I think is very important, it's to work, and I hate this word, and I apologize that I use this word, but we need to be agile. We need to make small steps to be able to make small steps back if we make a mistake. So, and that's first. Second, we really need to listen to our commercial priorities and do it together with commercials. We need to loop them involve, and we cannot integrate systems without understanding what is the commercial need for integration, what is the customer need for integration. So looping them in as early as possible and checking with customers and with the commercial teams as often as possible. I think that's a key success factor for the successful integration.
Yeah.
John, floor is yours.
Over to you. No, thank you, Monica.
I think it's about cost synergies. It's about reducing costs. This is about driving down costs. It's basically how can you put two networks together and basically get rid of one of the organizations, get more infrastructure, and run it with a significant lower cost. I'm sorry to say it. This is about headcounts in the first end. It's. I remember the turnaround of base in Belgium, when it had minus 36% in margin, to it had 36% positive margin, which Stan Miller did when he was the CEO for base in Belgium. It did a turnaround. He reduced the company from 1,200 to 600 and changed the whole way of the company was working and turned it into a very profitable business. Made it very aggressive with a multi-brand strategy as one of the first operators in Europe and so on. I think, and he did that without doing any consolidation. You could say P4 play in Poland is without consolidation. You can take WOM in Chile, no consolidation. You can take Hutchison in Denmark, no consolidation. There is a lot of things. I think there's a lot of, I'm sorry to say, a lot of these operators are a little bit too fat. Coming from a person like me, but honestly, they need to get a bit more slim. There can be done a lot there, but the consolidation is interesting, and particularly when we look at now moving into 5G, the way we will use spectrum in the future, the way we'll use network in the future, and so on. I think the synergies is actually increasing while we move into the 5G space.
I think we are close to out of time. Annie, would you like to make a comment on that one?
A comment and to Dean's question about encouraging operators to innovate individually rather than in these sort of large collaborative things. Actually, I think, Dean, it's about when the hangover wears off. And by the hangover, I mean the response, I think, is predictable enough to feeling very threatened by what we used to call, and I know you hate, the OTTs, and now they're, cloud hyperscalers and stuff. So what do you do when you're scared? You band together and try and develop things collectively to fight back. And I think possibly we're coming to the end of that phase. And I think maybe we're going to see more individual thinking. And as for the telco platform vision being backwards, I think you're right. And I think TM Forum just published a piece of research in which nobody wants to be a platform player. They want to be digital service providers. And that's because they perceive digital service providers of having end-to-end control rather than being a member of a platform that somebody else owns. I think that's completely missing a lot of tricks and a piece of wrong-headed thinking. Well, I'm done now.
well, thank you, Annie. And I think we are actually a little bit over the 45 minutes for this session. So
it's my fault I started early.
No problem. Are we happy, Annie, to wrap it up there?
Yeah, I think so.
This is a topic we could probably continue discussing for the rest of the morning, but I'm conscious of the rest of the event. So I think maybe it's just up to me now to thank John and Monika and Annie for what was some great conversation. I knew this would be a discussion where the conversation would be free-flowing. So thanks ever so much for your really interesting views. Really appreciate you taking part. And from my side, Annie, thanks so much for the opportunity to moderate it. And I think with that, Annie, I think I'm handing back to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone.